The Search for Baby Comb-Over. This poem was written in Paris. I had a sabbatical there. We were living in a big house right on the river that back in the day had been, you know, the sole residence of the Duc de somebody, but now it's chopped up into maybe 40 or so, 20 or so apartments with maybe 60 or 80 people dwelling in them. And so this building was kind of my television set. I mean, I had so many interesting neighbors that I just wrote poems about them, and this is one of them. In Paris one night, the doorbell rings, and there's this little guy shaking like a leaf and going, and his eyes get big, and he raises his hands like a gospel singer, and he goes, and for just a fraction of a second, I think he's doing the first part of Wilson Pickett's Land of a Thousand Dances, and that he wants me to join him in some kind of weird welcome to the neighborhood. So I raise my hands a little and begin to sort of hum along, though not really loudly in case I'm wrong about this. And I'm smiling the way old people smile when they can't hear you, but they want you to know that everything's okay as far as they're concerned. Or the way a poet smiles in a room full of scientists as if to say, hey, I'm just a poet, but your stuff's great, really, even if I don't understand it. And by the time I start to wonder if this gentleman wants to take the you got to know how to pony part or means to launch into it himself, he gives a little hop and slaps his hands down to his sides and says, please, you must not move the furniture after 11 o'clock of the night. So I lower my hands and I say, what? And he says, always you are moving it when the baby tried to sleep. You must not do it. And now that he's feeling a little bolder, he steps in closer where the light's better, and I see he's got something on his head, like strands of oily seaweed, something you'd expect to find on a rock after one of those big tanker spills in the channel. So I lean a little bit, and I realize just what stylists call a comb-over. Not a bad idea on the tall fellows, but definitely a grooming no-no for your vertically challenged caballeros, of which Monsieur here is certainly one, especially if they are yelling at you. But I'd read an article about AA that said when your loved ones stage an intervention and go off on you for getting drunk and busting up the furniture and running out into traffic and threatening to kill the president, it's best just to let them wind down and then say, you're probably right, because if you're combative, they will be too, then your problems will start all over again. So I just wait until Mr. Comb-Over stops shaking. It's not nice, I know, but it's the first name that comes to mind. And I say, you're probably right. And he raises a finger and opens his mouth as if to say something, but then he snaps his jaw shut and whirls around and marches downstairs, skidding a little and windmilling his arms and almost falling, but catching himself, though not without that indignant backward glance we all give the stupid step that some stupid idiot would have attended to long ago if he hadn't been so stupid. The next day I asked Nadine, the gardienne, qu'est-ce que c'est the deal avec the monsieur qui lives under moi? And Nadine says his femme is toujours busting his chops, but il est afraid of her. So il takes out his rage on the rest of nous. There's something else, though. A few days later, Barbara and I see Mr. and Mrs. Comb-Over crossing the Pont Marie, and she is a virtual giantess compared to him. Now, I remember once hearing Barbara give boyfriend advice to this niece of mine, and Barbara said, he's got to have a job. 2, he's got to tell you you're beautiful all the time. And 3, he's got to be taller than you are. So when I see Mrs. Comb-Over looming over her hubby, I say, well, that explains the busted chops. Not only that, Mrs. Comb-Over looks cheap. She looks rich, sure. Nadine told me that Monsieur is some sort de diplomat avec the Chilean delegation, but she also looks like one of those professional ladies offering her services up around the Rue Saint-Denis. But who are they, really? Comb-Over is one of those names from a 50s black and white movie. He's the kind of guy neighborhood kids call Mr. C, and who has a boss who says things like, now see here, Comb-Over, this sort of thing just won't do. He's like one of Dagwood's unnamed colleagues. He's not even Dagwood, who at least excites Mr. Dithers enough to be fired a couple of times a week, not to mention severely beaten. Only Dagwood is really in charge. Everything goes his way. Despite chronic incompetence, old Dag keeps the job that allows him his fabulous home life. Long naps, towering sandwiches, affectionate and well-behaved teenage children, a loyal dog, and best of all, the love of Blondie. Blondie, the name says it all. Glamorous, but fun. Big trashy Mrs. Comb-Over is not glamorous, although she thinks she is, and no fun at all. She's the anti-Blondie. Her job seems to be to stay home and smoke, since we're always smelling the cigarette fumes that seep up through the floor into our apartment day and night. And he says we're keeping Baby Comb-Over awake when we move the furniture, which we've never done. But then we've never seen Baby Comb-Over either, or heard him. Baby Comb-Over, the world's first silent baby. Barbara has this theory that, after a life of prostitution, Mrs. Comb-Over has not only repented, but undergone a false pregnancy and imaginary birth. Therefore, the reason why Baby Comb-Over is silent is that he is not a real baby who fusses and eats and wets and poops, but is instead a pillowcase with knots for ears and a smiley face drawn with a magic marker, and a hole for his mouth so Mrs. Comb-Over can teach it to smoke when it's older, like 8, say. Now I know what they fight about. You never spend any time with the baby, hisses Mrs. Comb-Over. I will, later, when he can talk, says Mr. Comb-Over. Here I am, stuck with this baby all day long, and those horrible people upstairs. And he says, oh, be silent, you prostitute. And she says, quiet, you horrible man, not in front of the baby. Maybe it's time for a call to the police. Or the newspapers. I can see the headlines now. Où est l'enfant Comb-Over? I feel sorry for him. With parents like this, it would be better if someone were to kidnap him. Or I could take him back to America with me. I, who have a wife who loves me and 2 grown sons. Why not? We've got all this extra room now. We'll feed him a lot and tickle him. There's nothing funnier than a fat, happy baby. And when the boys come home to visit, they'll take him out with them in their sports cars. It's my little brother, they'll say. He's French. The neighborhood kids, once a band of sullen mendicants, will beg us to let him play with them, even though he doesn't speak their language. Look, there they go toward the baseball field with Baby Comb-Over under their arm. I love you, Baby Comb-Over. You are Joseph Campbell's classic mythical hero, i.e., an agent of change who relinquishes self-interest and breaks down the established social order. But you're so pale. You stayed out too long and caught cold. Barbara and the boys gather around his bed. They hug each other, and we try not to cry. Baby Comb-Over is smiling. He always smiled, that kid. His little mouth begins to move, and we lean in, and we think we hear him say, "Be brave for me." Back in Paris, Mr. Comb-Over grows a full head of hair. Mrs. Comb-Over reaches up to touch it. He puts down his attaché case and caresses her cheek. "How beautiful you are," he says. "It's so quiet now." And then they hear it. In the next room, a child is crying. I've read that a couple of times, and people have come up after us and said, "So sorry, our little baby dies." It's just a pillowcase with knots for ears and a magic marker, for eyes and a hole where his mouth should be. But death is death, whether it's a pet or a relative or a pillowcase.